All right, so this is going to be another big one. We're going to build an entire document review application. This is one of our most requested client builds because all companies have documents and need to review or process them. And I'm going to share everything. We're going to start from ideation to designing the backend, the front end, bringing everything together, and then even deploying it in Microsoft Azure. So if you want to get into the AI, if you need a portfolio project, or if you simply want to pair program with me for a couple of hours, then make sure to check out this video. I know it's a long one. If you can watch it right now, make sure to bookmark it because it's going to be an amazing learning experience, I can guarantee. All right, welcome to another end-to-end build. Let's get started. I have another exciting one for you. So a little bit of housekeeping to get you up to speed. We have the GitHub repository, link will be in the description as always. Next to that, I'm trying something new. I have the basic setup of a documentation website for you to follow along. I just have the beginning and the client brief and the data that we will be going over in here because the rest of the project I'm still going to build out. When you watch this video, I will make sure to update this. So beyond the video and everything that I share, you also have some resources that you can fall back to. So what are we going to build in this video? We are going to build one of the most requested projects from our clients, and that is a document review application. Now, these come in all ways, shapes, and forms pretty much, but the process is always there is some type of document that comes in or is generated that then needs to be reviewed against a certain set of criteria, rules, business logic, quality, anything you can really imagine. And then based on that, there is an approval gate that then decides, okay, can we just send this document to the client? Can we update this record in the database, or do we need to make some changes? That's the overarching philosophy really of what we're building is. And you can apply this to almost anything that relates to processing documents, which is really cool. Now, for this particular example, we are going to be working with invoices because this is a document that we can all understand. It has some good rules and criteria that we can test against. So this is a great example. So we're going to work for a hypothetical company called North Star Facilities. And what's going to be different about this particular video is not only like that it's a document review pipeline, but we're also going to make it more like enterprise ready, if you will, as we will be working with the Microsoft Azure cloud environment, where in some of, or for most of my other tutorials, you see me directly working with OpenAI or with Anthropic. And for this, we're going to like step that up a notch and make it more, like I've said, production ready, enterprise ready. Don't worry about this. It's free to follow along, free to get started. You can even get like $200 of credits that you can use on Azure. And this is just a skill that you need to learn if you want to build with AI. So what are we going to build? Well, we're going to build the entire document processing pipeline all the way from extraction, meaning we take a document and we get the text from it, then processing it through AI, determining the checks, and also even the front end around that so we can make it visually for the user. Now, as always with these end-to-end builds, this is not going to be a beginner course. I'm going to pretty much go at full speed. I'll try to do my best to explain as much as possible, but if at any moment you feel like things are going too fast, make sure to check out the other videos on my channel or go to my free Python for AI course, 5-hour course here on YouTube that will bring you up to speed on what we're doing over here. Now, next to that, I will be using AI coding agents. I will use Glido, a dictation app, to talk into that. So if at any point during the video you see this bar pop up pretty much, that means I'm talking to the dictation app. If you want to try that out, you can click here in the documentation page, try Glido for free, and then you can get started. It's one of the best dictation apps on the market for developers right now, so I highly recommend that you give it a shot. All right, so let's get into the client brief. So we will be working for Maya in this case. We're going to help Maya with her workflow. She works at the finance department of North Star Facilities, and what they pretty much as part of their work and operations, they process invoices as most companies do, right? So let's zoom in on the user story, meaning, okay, what is the request that Maya pretty much has and what she wants to accomplish? So as a finance administrator at a European company, I want to upload a multilingual invoice or receipt and receive the prepared review containing the best combined extraction, VAT and policy results, and a suggested GL account. So that's the general ledger account where we're going to book it in the financial system, and then approve documents quickly or turn them back to the suppliers with an error if there's something we need to course correct. So typical document processing pipeline that you can map to all kinds of different documents and workflows. Now, then we have some requirements on what the app should be able to do. So if we look at this, so we're going to focus on PDFs and images, then recognize whether it's an invoice or a receipt. So that's a classification step. Then we're going to perform the extraction layer, validation layer, and then we're going to apply the policies to it to perform certain types of checks. Is this present? Is that present? Do we need to adjust anything? Then we do another classification step where we decide which general ledger account this belongs to. And then in the UI, we let Maya correct the fields, approve, reject, and drafts, and pretty much prepare a correction email. And then as a final step, we also want to keep the history in there. So that's quite a lot, right? But the cool thing is when we describe a project like this, we can start to work from this starting point. And when you are working with clients, this is always like first that you need to get clear on. Look, what does the client want? What is the user story of how they describe it, first in non-technical terms, and then break that down to this what you would call the functional requirements, really, of the start. So then if we look at the architecture, is we're going to use models on Azure, we're going to extract the evidence, we're going to apply the rules, and then the human is going to review it. That's the client brief. So are you excited to get started? Okay, let's continue. So for every project, I always want to start with the data. I really have an obsession with the data itself because it is often the most important part. I also come from a data science background. So for the first 4 years of my professional career, that is where I spent most of my time, digging through data, cleaning data, parsing data, preparing data for machine learning models. Nowadays, you can all just like one-shot that with AI. It's a completely different world, but that's where I spend most of my time, and I still really like it. And it's such an important skill because I've found over the years that a lot of people coming from software development backgrounds and now get into AI engineering, they don't take this step as seriously, trying to understand the data, because they are more used to working with deterministic ins and outputs, and they reason more through the application layer from a data type perspective, meaning is it processing a string, is it processing integers, is it like processing a JSON file, but not necessarily looking at the semantics of the data, meaning what does the data tell us? What does the data mean? What are the different types of categories that we have in here? So I created a fictional corpus to work with. So if I open up, let's see, the repository. So this is the GitHub repository that you can clone. We have it set up in a monorepo, backend, frontend in here. But if you look into the samples, you can see we have the following. Let's open one over here to get a feel for what this looks like. So let's see. You can see that. Yeah, there we go. So we got an invoice, right? Pretty standard. It's this is an English invoice. We got the VAT on there. We got some numbers. So this all looks good. So we have similar types of documents, and we also have, let's see. Oh, we can actually open up this one over here. So this is a little bit of a different. This is a scan, a little bit of different quality, and we also have a receipt in here. So again, a little bit of a different style that we need to be able to work with. So that's pretty much always when you're working with document pipelines, is that you have different types of data. Even though they're all like invoices and receipts, sometimes you have tricky documents. So that's the data set that we are going to be working with. And then in particular, you can see the categories over here. So 1 to 4 are documents that our model should parse as ready. Then here are one that needs a review. And also we have a warning of a missing purchasing order. So there are various outcomes that we ultimately need to get to, and where we can build a validation around. Okay, then let's briefly look at the high-level architecture that we are going to be working towards. So if we reason from the user, from Maya, right, we're going to start with a UI that we're going to build in React. So this is going to be the front end of the application. In there, we can upload the document, we can start the process, and from there, we're going to process it via an API layer, which is our backend, and we're going to use FastAPI for that. Then we're going to use Azure for the extraction layer, and then back in our backend, in our Python application, we're going to process the deterministic finance rules, and then we're going to store everything in a SQLite database, which we can store locally on your machine. And we're going to look into doing a hybrid extraction because I want to experiment with different types of approaches. Because when you do this in the real world, you're always going to run into edge cases and challenges, and often a hybrid approach to attack the documents from multiple different angles is what's going to cause the eventual best result. So I want to show you what that looks like. So it's going to be a combination of a resource that we can use inside Azure, which is called Document Intelligence, which we'll start with. And then we're also going to use Azure OpenAI, where we can just use general LLMs. We can use some of the latest GPT models who also have vision capabilities and show what that can do as well. So let's see. What we are now going to start with is, first of all, if you want to follow along, make sure to clone this repository and set everything up. It's very minimal right now. There's not much in there. We're going to start with the backend, and then later we're going to come back with the front end. But what we're going to do is we're going to set up our environment first and make sure we can run and execute code before we dive into setting up the models and the endpoints that we're going to work with on Azure. Because what I want to show you here is, because this is a monorepo, right? Meaning we have both a backend and a front end in here. You can see that we already have the PyProject.toml in here. And I already plugged in some dependencies that I know which we are going to use. This may change over time, but this is a good starting point. And first, we need to create a virtual environment for this. So what I can do is, if I open up a terminal in here, in the root of this project, you'll see that we're right now in invoice review. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cd into the backend. And now you can see we are here co-located with the PyProject.toml. So this is where I now can run a UV sync to create our virtual environment based on these dependencies that are in here. So we have some regular dependencies and as well as some development dependencies that we have. So if I now clear this up, but what you need to know with these monorepo style setups, which are great for your AI agents because they can reason over the context from the backend and the front end, is that it can be a little bit tricky to set up and manage your environment within your IDE. Because if I now come in the backend and let's say I create a test.py in here. And for me, it's already set up, but probably if I just delete this right now, and reset it, yeah. So I'm just gonna, because I already set this up, so it may be that my cursor environment remembered this. You can see right now, I don't have an interpreter in here. So let's run UV sync one more time to create this. If I click in here, I usually cannot see the virtual environment that we just created, as it by default only looks in the root of the project. So then it can get tricky. So what you then can do is you can just copy the path from your virtual environment. And then when you come here, you can enter the path, you can paste that and just plug that in. And that should set it correctly to what you can see right now over here. It's actually using the virtual environment from my backend folder over here. So that can be a little bit tricky to set up. So make sure you follow along with it. How you can test that, you can simply import one of the libraries that we have as a dependency. So let's say we want to do, let's say import pydantic. So, and we run this should not error. So this should just run over here. So now we know, okay, the virtual environment is set up correctly. If you've been watching my videos, you know I also often like to use the interactive session over here on the right, which we can do through IPyKernel. So, okay, that all seems good. Ready to start working with the backend. So we'll leave that test.py file over here for now, and then let's come back to the setup. So now, if you've never worked with Azure before, I recommend right now to set up an account, create a free, like it's free, and you can get $200 in credits that you can use for up to 30 days. So it will be a great lesson to follow along with this. So one thing to know about the Azure platform, let me actually go to, let's see, our Azure environment over here. Let's see if I'm still logged in and come back. So what you need to know about how Azure works is that there is a hierarchy to it. So at the top level, you have your account, which is pretty much, they call it your tenant. And underneath that, automatically you create a subscription. So if you go through the account creation process, even if you set up a free account, you will have a subscription which you can give a name. So if I now open up our Azure environment here, you can see I am now inside the portal. Now, how it then works if we go a level lower, Azure organizes everything through resource groups. And resource groups, you can pretty much view those as projects or even folders where we can put stuff in. So for this project, we are going to create a new project, a new resource group, which we are going to call resource group rg-invoice-review. And then in there, we're going to put the resources that we're going to use. So a little bit of an intro about the hierarchy of how Azure works. As we will walk through it together, it will become more clear. So go to the portal, make use of the credits, otherwise use a free account. By the way, the document intelligence plan that we are going to use is also on the free plan. So don't worry about costs at all. Using OpenAI directly and experimenting with that in the afternoon is going to be more expensive than what we're going to do in this video. Cool. Now, then here is also something cool about working with Azure. And this is something all the major cloud platforms like AWS, GCP, and even like Railway and Render can also do nowadays. This is super powerful when you combine this with AI agents, but that is working with the CLI, right? So the command line interface. So in Azure, what we can do is we can provision our resources by clicking through the menu. So remember, right, we had the resource groups. So I could come in here and I could say, you know what, I want to create a new resource group. And we'll go through the setup, etc. And we can set all of this up and we can click through it. That is one way to do it, but we can also do it through the CLI, which is going to be way faster. The only thing that you need to keep in mind is we are going to give an agent access to an environment. And with that, you always need to be careful. But once you set it up correctly and you know how to use it and you pay close attention to what the agent is doing, it's way more convenient to work with it. So throughout this tutorial, I'm going to showcase kind of like both setups, so through the portal, so you've seen that as well as the CLI. But first, let's set up the CLI. So you can install it, macOS, Windows, Linux, run the commands. Then if you open up a terminal, let's see, we got a terminal, I can do an AZ, I already have it installed, I can do AZ version. You can see Azure CLI is installed. If you do an AC login, you'll be prompted to open the browser. That's where you can log into your account, and that's how you can authenticate. I've already done that, so I'm not going to do that. So that is the setup. And then what we can do is we can create our resource group. Now, this is the first experiment for you to do this via the CLI. Now, you can see the commands over here. So we use AC to start it, then we do group create, and then we give it a name. I recommend to use that exact name, RG Invoice Review. Location, West Europe. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter when you are following this tutorial. You can simply like copy paste this, but you could also set this to the US, for example. I don't know exactly what the parameter for that is. It will probably be East US or US. You can ask your agent if you specifically want to have it in the US right now, but since it's a tutorial, it doesn't really matter as much. So what I can do, if I now come to my terminal with the CLI installed, I can run this. So let's see what happens if we do this. It will take a couple of seconds and it says, look, we created something. Now, if I come back to the portal and I click on resource groups and I give it a couple of seconds, you can see it's currently not in here. Let me refresh this. There we go. RG Invoice Review. So we now got an empty project layer. If I look in here, you can see this is all empty. This is where your resources would show up. So there's nothing in there, but we created the project. Cool. All right, now let's continue. So you can also clean it up if you want, but I don't recommend doing that. So now there are two additional setups, Foundry and Document Intelligence. I'm actually going to start with Document Intelligence first to show you what that looks like. So if we go to Azure Document Intelligence and look at some of the resources on there, we can find, and actually what I'm looking for is this, the documentation. Let's see. So what is it? This is an AI service from Microsoft on Azure that we can use to extract information from documents. And what's great about Azure Document Intelligence is that out of the box, they have a whole bunch of pre-built models. So this is not using an LLM, it's not using a language model, and that's also why it's way faster and way cheaper. We're going to use a pre-trained custom machine learning model that's trained to perform specific tasks. So you can see bank statements, checks, contracts, credit cards, invoices. There are all types of documents where we have a model for. So here you can see how that works, how it can split that up. What we of course are going to use in this case is the invoice and the receipt model. So here you can learn more about how that works and what that means, but that's going to be the starting point. This is a very accurate, cheap and fast resource that we can use that often for me, if I go beyond the truly open source parsing methods, like you also have Docling, which I'm a big fan of, Docling. I've also showcased this many times on the channel here. This is a fully open source tool that you can use for document extraction. For this example that we are going to work through in this tutorial, you could have also used Docling and it would have worked fine because the examples are not as complicated. But I know from experience that at some point, when you're doing this for a real client, you're going to run into challenges potentially. And then you may need a hybrid approach. Okay, so coming back to our setup, what are we going to do? So we are going to provision this through the CLI so we don't have to click through the menu. And the thing is, I'm just going to show you one time how to start that process. If you are in a resource group and I click create, this is where we get into the whole marketplace of everything that's on Azure. There's a lot in here. If I then search for document intelligence, you can see this is the one from Microsoft. I can click on create. This is was formerly called form recognizer. You saw that in the CLI as well as some documentation, you'll find that it will still be listed as a form recognizer. So you can see here we can do the setup, right? We can give the name, we can do the placement, etc. All of that. We can click through that, but we're not going to do that because we're going to use the CLI because that's what the cool kids do. So if we go in here and look at what it's doing, we can see AC Cognitive Services account create. And then we need to specify our resource group name. So this is the resource group we just created, right? And then you can see what we're setting up over here. The F0 means we're on the free plan, location West Europe. Again, you can change this if you want, but you can also just follow along with this. So I'm going to come over here and let's run this. So now we should be able to, so starting, creating, and there we go, that is now created. So let's come back over to Azure and let's see what this looks like. Again, we'll go in our resource group. Now we can see the following resource, DI invoice review. So if we click in here, we can then first of all see our keys and endpoints. So this is where we're going to copy this information. So now if I come back to our project, you can see that we have our example environment file over here. So we're going to create a copy of that. Make sure to name this .env, and then you can see there are two placeholder records for document intelligence and later for Azure OpenAI. So first we're going to swap out these and we're going to take our key number 1. That's the only one we need. We don't need key number 2. Plug that in here. I'm going to nuke this resource afterwards. So you can try and steal my credentials, but it won't work unless I forget, and then it will work. Okay, then we're going to put our endpoint in here. So that's what you want to do. Endpoint and key. Don't care about key number 2 right now. Okay, and now we need to test this. So let's see if there's actually some quick start documentation in here. So if I go to so what I did, by the way, for you to follow along, let's see. there was a, where are we? There was a link that I could click on, review the SDK quick start. I don't recommend going into the studio because again, that's via the UI. We can click, we don't want that. We just want the API layer. So here we can see get started with document intelligence. We have a Python setup in here. And we have here, you can see the prerequisites setup. So we're going to use the Azure AI document intelligence. And here's the version in there. I'm just going to use the latest. I believe this is already in our project, right? Yes. Okay. You can see this should already be in our environment. If it were not, we would have to do a UV add and we would put this and we would fix that or just check if the, I'm not sure if this is the latest version or a fixed version, may run into some issues there, but you would do a UV add, but we already have it in there. Okay, so that's good. Now let's see what we need to do here. Let's see the layout model. I pretty much want to process an invoice. So this is now where I get too lazy and I'm going to take this. We're going to come over here and in here, what I'm going to do is I'm first going to create a folder. We're going to call it services. And in here, I want to have a document intelligence service.py. And then what we're going to do is we're going to open up a new agent. And for this video, I'm probably gonna switch between Composer 2.5 Fast, which is really nice to work with. And I'm going to, for some of the bigger tasks, I might try the new Grok model. I haven't really experimented with this one. So let's just start over here and let's just plug in the URL and then let's give Glido a spin. Hey, I want to set up a document intelligence service. I already plugged in my API key in the endpoint. What I want to do is I want to process invoices. You can check some of these sample documents in there. Actually, you know what? There is one sample invoice PDF, which we are going to start with. I will put the link to that below. Set up a minimal service to connect with document intelligence, process the invoice, and then print the data model so I can check it out. Work directly in the file that I already created. So that was Glido in action. And if you want to try it out completely for free, make sure to grab the link in the description, get.glido.com/Dave. And even if you're already using a dictation app, if you are a developer, I am 100% confident that you will like this better than any of the other tools out there. So make sure to give it a try. Okay, so there we go. So that would pretty much be it. And then when you are working with these AI agents, there's two ways you can work with them, right? So I can immediately shoot this off. Or I could also first get into plan mode, create a plan and then accept it. Right now, I just want to move quickly and I have full confidence in this that it will figure it out. So what I now want to do and why I set it up like this is, and you'll find me do that. I have a particular way of working with Python and how I like to structure everything, right? So I could have just said, look, help me connect to document intelligence. And it would have perfectly done it, but I know that I'm going to work in the backend, in the app folder, and then in here, the services, I want to create a service class in here. So I already manually create that so that I steer the AI into that direction because I know that's how I want things to see. So now you can see it's now going to create that class and that client for me. So let's see what it's going to do and what that will look like. Okay, so it's going to use the pre-built invoice one. It's going to take that sample invoice that I created, and then, you know what, I'm going to add something else to this, because when you set up service files like this, sometimes it can get messy, and I'd rather have a playground where we're going to test things. And can you actually make the service class a little bit cleaner? Put everything into a nice class and then take the example and how we run everything out of that class and put that into the playground folder that I created. Please make sure you use and update the paths correctly. So from the playground folder, I can run it, test it, look at the output to see what we're working with. So this is another common pattern that I always like to use, because in here we are essentially building an application layer. And if you, within your application layer, have these tests like, hey, I want to run this particular example, this code does not belong in your application layer. It's just for testing. So that's why I usually like to work with the playground file, which we're now going to set up, that is then going to import that service class from the app folder. So you can see it's now cleaning this up. So let's see what it's doing. This should now be very clean. So that looks good. Let's see what we got in here. So the document intelligence could not be resolved. We'll see if that should be, I think that should resolve. Yeah, so now, and this is always a little bit tricky because we have to see if the paths are set up correctly. So let's see what we're doing. So right now, if I import this, are you still with me? There we go, clean this up. So let's see, we have our repo root. So we set that, then we set the backend root over here, and then we have our sample invoice. So is that correct? Right now, let me actually put you, let's see, what are we doing? Wrong button over here. So now you can see we have the full path to our PDF. Okay, so we're going to put that and we're going to append that to the system path. Okay, that's great. So now let's see if we can actually import this. So yeah, so here you can see that my IDE, in this case, base Pyrite, is still giving some issues on this import, but this is incorrect because the import just resolves fine. And now here we have a main function where we can say, look, now we're going to create the document intelligence service, or we're going to create an instance of that, which let's see, we just created over here. So you can now see this is just a clean way to, where do we actually make the call? Begin analyze document. All right, looking good. So let's run the result. And let's see, first need to put this in memory, result. Okay, so this is now where we're actually take the PDF and we're sending it to Azure, to the model to run. So you can see this takes a couple of seconds. Let's see how long this takes. There we go, this is now complete. And now when I look at the result, you can see that we get a whole bunch of JSON data. So now let's see if we do like a pretty print on that to see what it looks like. Let's see what we got. You can see this is there we go. You can now see, okay, which API version we're using, the pre-built invoice. And then first of all, we see the content of all of it. And then we also have the pages, and this is really where we go into like the pixel metadata level metadata information. So you can see, and let me actually show you what this looks like. And this is also why I like to use a model like this over an LLM, because an LLM can interpret the page, but this can really do it with pixel precision, really. So what do I mean with that? Because it's like a custom trained machine learning model. If you look at, this is the invoice that we were processing, you can now see that it found the content of Contoso, which you can see up over here, or either over here. It has like an exact location of where it found that on the page. So literally like it can draw a box around that. And that is very useful information in some cases because it's all extra content that we can use later down the line. Okay, so that all looks good, but what I am now more interested in is if, let's see, so we have the results. Oh, I shouldn't have closed that out. Wait. Let's run it one more time. Because what we need to do is, instead of looking at everything, I do want to know what the top level keys are. So let's see, if I am in here, you can see, is this already, just checking how this is set up right now. So I'm going to do type results. Okay, so this is a result. So can I run keys on this? Yes, so we got I can probably call this, so this is the information eventually that we need in order to read everything that's on here. Okay, so that's good. But now next, what I want to do, this is pretty much like raw data. It's a string, it's the content. And next up, when I've parsed data, I always want to try and put it into a data model. I like to use Pydantic for this, so we can create a very strict schema of what we're trying to get. So now I'm going to close this out, and let's see. So the playground works. We're going to open up our chat here again, and now I'm going to say the following. Okay, so the extraction works right now. We have a clean document intelligence service. Right now, I want to create a data model around it using Pydantic. I've tested with an invoice right now, but I also want a receipt model. You can go through the samples in this project to see what that looks like. Can you now create a folder in the app folder, call it schemas, and put the invoice and the receipt folder in there, and then run a couple of experiments with some of the data that is in there to make sure we can fill them and we can map them. You may need to look into the document intelligence documentation to figure out what types of fields we can extract. Okay, so that's another prompt that I can do, and right now I would use the plan mode because this is a little bit of a bigger scope. So you'll see in a bit what we are going to do, but we're going to start mapping things, because if we want to apply business logic, right, to extract the data, so we want to check, look, is there a VAT number that's present? And is it not only present, but is it also a valid European VAT number, which follows a particular format, right? Then we, of course, need to be able to map VAT to, like, what we extract from the document to a variable within our application. Now, that's where Pydantic and these data models can come in. And that's what we're going to set up right now. And one of the things that I just did with a very brief prompt over here, but that's crazy powerful, is mentioning the data itself, right? So you can see I mentioned, hey, look in the data, there are receipts and PDFs. Run a couple of examples. So what this is now going to do, you can see here, if we follow this, it's just going to call the API layer in a loop, and it's going to send those documents there, and it's going to look at the JSON shapes. So you can see this is what we were just doing manually. So we saw, look, we get this, we get that, and I manually did a test. And now it's going to ask me a question. So for the Pydantic models, which scope do you want in this slice? I pretty much want everything manifest aligned core fields only, full Azure pre-built field. Yes, I want everything, like as much as possible. Okay, now let's continue working on that. And while this is creating the plan, let's already look a few steps ahead, because that's the beauty of working with AI right now. We can just put on a task and then we can just continue. So here we pretty much did this, right? We checked, we analyzed our first invoice. But now what I'm also going to do, we're going to set up Azure AI Foundry. Azure AI Foundry, or Azure OpenAI, that's what it used to be called. Through this, we can provision LLMs and access them through Azure. This will give us added security and data protection over directly working with OpenAI or Anthropic. So if you look, for example, to Azure, OpenAI, security, privacy, I always this is the page. You'll find that you can read over this, but this is pretty much what Azure can guarantee. So for all of our clients where we use LLMs, we do that through Azure OpenAI, through Azure AI Foundry. So how do you set that up? It's pretty much the same as document intelligence. We can also do it through the CLI, but now I'm actually going to show you what this looks like if we were doing this through the UI. So coming back to our resource invoice group, this is document intelligence. I'm going to click create. I'm going to search for Foundry. You'll see Microsoft Foundry. Let's create it. Then you have your subscription, your resource group, existing one. Now here you need to give it a unique name. And I'm going to put this again in West Europe. Now the name here needs to be globally unique. So not just unique on your account, but globally. So this is always a little bit annoying. So what I can do, for example, right now, I can do RG and I do, let's say, invoice review. And then I'm just going to call this Foundry. Let's see. Does that make sense? Resource group. No, that's... The thing is, I always struggle with this. We've worked with a lot of clients. Almost all of our clients have these different naming conventions for how you should call things. Ultimately, doesn't matter. So invoice review Foundry, that's just what I'm going to call it. But the thing is, if I do this right now and I don't delete this, you cannot do that. So you may need to add a 2 behind that, or your name or something like that. Okay, so let's see. Then we also need, so this is the top level in here. Foundry also comes with projects. So for the sake of simplicity, let's just call this project. This can probably be similar in your in your setup. Okay, now we can do review and create. It will do a final check. Takes a couple of seconds usually. Now we come back over here to look at our created plan. So let me see what we got over here. Let's do a quick sanity check. How long is this? It mapped quite some things. So the goal, introduce normalized kinetic models, app schemas. Yes, that's where I want it. Design boundaries. Okay, folder layout. Schemas, common. Okay. All right, let's see. I just want to see what this looks like, but this overall seems good to me. Clear separation of concerns. So let's work on that and come back to our creation process. You can see a couple of seconds and now we can create it. So this will again take some time. And like I've said, this is a great tip. If you do this professionally and like if you work at the company, you're working with AI, there's a high chance you're already using something like this, or like through AWS and then through Bedrock. But if you're just starting out, or you're thinking about starting as a freelancer and you want to serve clients directly, this is what you want. This tackles all of those arguments like, hey, what about our data? Like there's like not all questions, I should be clear on that, but our argument is pretty much always like, look, the data that you share with Azure OpenAI over here is pretty much as safe as the data sitting in your Outlook inbox, which most of the people here are already using, right? So again, you can send literally this page to them so they understand the ins and outs of what is happening with their data, but it helps a lot with sales to get your foot in the door. And the cool thing is the pricing for the models is exactly the same as if you were to do it directly through OpenAI. And you can use the same models as you will see. So we can now go, it is now created. So again, let's zoom out one more time. I know in the beginning, Azure is a big black box, but it's not that complicated. We have our resource group. Right now, you can see that it created the Foundry resource, and then in there, it also decided it needs a project. One thing to know about Microsoft and Azure is that they fucking change things every month. It's really annoying. Every month, this is different. It has a different name, it has a different UI, and it's just something you have to deal with. That's why I like working with the CLI normally, because that remains pretty consistent. I don't even know where to go right now. So what happens is if you go in here, you go to the portal, you'll go to a different domain because they moved this whole thing over to ai.azure.com. So you'll find that there is a lot of redirects and loops that you can get into. Microsoft is known to do stuff like that. So now you can see we are now inside our Foundry. So this is like a different environment. You can also see there are multiple projects in here. So if I go to view all resources, you'll also see like some of our other internal stuff, client projects that we have. So everything is put in here. So I just created the invoice review Foundry project. Now I'm in here. Now what we can do, we have some information. What you need to grab is you need to grab the API key. Come over here. So let's see, this is a little bit messy right now. So let's see, we clean out the plan. Keep changes. Is this completed? Okay, this seems to be completed. We'll get back to that in a bit, but just to make sure we're all still on the same page. If I now come back to my environment files, you can see we have the endpoint and we have our API key, which I just copied. And then what you need is you want this one, not this one, but the Azure OpenAI over here. Plug that in here. The model deployment is already filled in here, but the thing is we first need to actually deploy that. One thing that's different with using Anthropic or OpenAI directly is if you create this whole project, you by default have no deployments. So there's no model that you can use. So this will now fail. So if I now go to view deployments, you can see, and again, make sure you're at the right project because here you can it also has a tendency to sometimes switch. And one other thing that I just noticed is that this is annoying. I noticed that I set it to West Europe, and you probably as well if you follow along. And if you go to Azure OpenAI models availability, let's see, which one do we need? Is it this one? They have this this one. You can see not all models are available in every region. So if I go to, I don't even see West Europe in here, but let's just quickly check, because probably the model that I want to deploy is not available, but it doesn't really matter as much. We can pretty much pick anyone. Like, let's see if I now, because in the example that I picked the Terra model, could very well be that it will now say that this model isn't, let's see if it's available. Okay, might be available, okay. Is it available? Okay, seems to be available. It is now deployed. So this is for you, something to keep in mind. Microsoft is really annoying with quota and regions. So if you see, look, I cannot use this exact model, like you can pick something else. It doesn't really matter as much. And now we're on this screen over here where we can actually test this out. By default, it will say the Entra ID, you don't want that, you want key authentication. Then what I can do, so again, coming back, you can see now we have a model deployment. We have just one. If you want another deployment, you can just go in here and try to pick any of those things in here. Not all will work. So there will be models in here. We're like, oh, whoa, I want to try this model. And we'll say, look, that's not accessible to your account. So that's just something you need to navigate through. Most of the OpenAI models will be available in most regions. And again, you may need to cross-check some of these tables over here. So you're learning a lot about Azure, right? So I understand this, but that's also part of this tutorial, right? It's like go a little bit slower. This could very well be the most important lesson learned out of this whole project, because this is how you do it in the real world. And setting all of this up can be annoying. So what we got our information filled in. I can now, let's reuse our test.py, because we have our endpoint, we have our model, and we have our API key. Let's now, for just the sake of this test, let's just take our API key, plug it in here. Cool, capital of France. Now, one thing you'll notice, and this is what makes working with Azure OpenAI also really convenient, look at the imports. It just says from OpenAI, client OpenAI. This is all very familiar to what you would normally do, right? There's just literally one difference. It's the endpoint. So you plug in a different base URL in the client, and that now routes everything through Azure. So let's see if we can establish the connection. I think we can. What's the capital of France? Paris. Okay, that seems to work. Good, so now we have a setup over here. So that works. Let me actually leave this in here, because what I now want to do is I want to open up this again, and now we can come back to what we were doing over here. But first, I want to, let's see, yeah, we can keep this selected. And I'm going to say, I also added Azure OpenAI to this project. Can you create a service similar to document intelligence, but then for the model that you see over here, you can hard code the model, the API key, and the endpoint is in my environment variable. So make sure you load that correctly. All right, so while we give that a spin, let's now start looking at what we created. So we got our model over here. So this is now what it created. There's a whole bunch of fields that we got from here, and then there's a mapping. So I currently don't fully understand how the mapping relates to the model. It could just be parsing, right? Because this is big. It's probably just big like JSON object, where this is just a clean pydantic model. So you can see invoice a line item, it has a description, a quantity, a unit, etc. Yeah. So let's double check that actually to see. So we're back in the document intelligence setup. Do I get it correctly that we use mapping.py to take the JSON object output from document intelligence and then map it to the models that we created? Is that the mental model that do I understand that correctly? That's pretty much what I want to say. Okay, so let's ask that. So, and then there's a common model. Okay, yeah. So this is a big model as well. So yeah, okay, that's the right mental model. Okay, yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Okay, surface layer mapping reads the dict. It doesn't know about yeah. Okay. And what about the common.py? What's in there and why do we need that? It's probably going to be that. So remember, right? We're using an invoice model and a receipts model, and there's probably shared fields in there. So we got extracted string, extracted dates. And do we import? Just want to check if. So in the mapping, we import those fields. So let's see. How does it explain that? It's a shared building block between Azure's messy JSON and the models. They import it, so it's a reusable field. So extracted string. All right, so it's a helper function to standardize all of that. Makes sense. Okay, now let's see what we're doing over here. Now we have an Azure OpenAI service. Let's see, that all works. Backend service app. Can you create a test file in the playground, similar to what we have with document intelligence? Make sure the imports are correct so we can test it. We can pretty much point it to any input or test to run it. Okay, so let's run that. And now what we have created over here, you can see we have the deployment name, which is hard-coded in here. We have the backend root, and then we have, let's see, what do we do? Setting, where is this coming from? We set up, okay, settings. Okay, so now we have a client. So now we have two models that we can use, and now this should create another playground file over here. Let's see. So we can do create OpenAI response. Let's see what we have in here. Are the paths correctly? Yes. What do we do? Okay, this is a CLI. I don't like that. Okay, yeah, I see. Like this is it created a CLI or it has a default prompt. I don't like that. I just pretty much want to have this in here and just hard code it for now because I want to experiment with this, right? So I don't care about using the terminal in here. So we set the prompt, we create the Azure OpenAI service. I create a response. This is the response that we get back. It's a whole bunch of information in there, and then we can just do a model dump. So we can see everything that's in there. So you'll find there's more metadata in here. There's even some, some content filters. That's, I think, extra metadata that we can get through using Azure. What we ultimately want is this, right? So we want output content. So ultimately that's what so it would be the response dot output dot content. Is this the one? So this is the response. And then ultimately we even want let's see if it's still a model or where it's a dictionary. So no, we need text. So now, what's this? Is that also still a list? What's in here? Do we need this? There we go. Okay, so that's how we ultimately get the text back from our, let's see, let's also put a print in here. I actually don't care about this for now. So now we can just run that. And now we just, it would call it and then we get the text back. Okay, so we are already in a pretty good spot right now because we can take a document, we can send it to an endpoint and we can get the information back from it. And we also have an LLM that we can throw in the mix. So now we can start to implement some of the business logic, right? So this is a very first important milestone in terms of the setup for the project. So now if we look at all of the functional requirements, so this is more for the front end, which we'll get back to later. First, we need to recognize whether the document is an invoice or a receipt automatically. And then we need to process it based on that particular type, right? So we know that we have a setup. Let's see where it is. Coming back over here in our backend, we have our servers. Let's actually check if we already set that up correctly in document intelligence. And yeah, okay. So we have a way to analyze an invoice and a receipt, right? So now the first part of the pipeline, really, of the workflow is to decide, how do we decide what it is? And for that, just for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to use an LLM step for this to check that out. We may also want to check if document intelligence can do this. And like the thing you should know here is, can we also just do this entire project with one LLM? Yes, we can probably do that. But that's not the goal. I want to show you the different types of models and approaches so that as the complexity scales and as your requirements change, maybe on pricing, speed, all of that, you know what to do. So now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure if document intelligence can classify. So let's actually check that first. Let's continue working in here and say, can you quickly search for me whether document intelligence can classify documents and make a distinction between invoices and receipts? I want to have a classification step so I know which model to kick off depending on a random data object that's coming in. Okay, so let's see what we get out of that. So short answer, it does not ship a classifier. What it does, let's see, classify first, extract second. Yeah, okay. So that's literally what we're going to do right now. So what I would then do is I would probably call it just like a pipeline of some sort. We're going to create a processing pipeline. And in here, we're going to set up the processing steps. So that is now good. So, okay, let's continue. Okay, let's do that. I created a pipeline folder. Can you create a simple structured output step in there using Azure OpenAI and the model that we're using to create the classification step? Use structured output and use Pydantic AI in order to set this up. Check the documentation to find the cleanest and shortest pattern that we can use for this. And for this, I'm also going to use a plan again. So what are we going to do? In the pipeline, imagine PDF comes in, classification step. LLM checks, is this an invoice? Is this a PDF? Based on that, we're going to create a processing pipeline. So I know that in this case, we need structured output, and I just love to work with Pydantic AI. So if we get in here, and where is just the installation, I'm just looking for like the first core concept. So we're going to build a very simple agent like this, where we can plug in a model, we can give the output type, which is going to be either depending on how it's going to set it up, it's either going to be a model, or we're just going to use a literal. We could probably just use a literal. Okay, and it's asking if we want to add the dependency. Let's see what's already in there. It's not in there. Yeah, sure. Let's use this one. So now it's going to add that. Now that I'm doing this, I'm still working on main, but I actually want to keep that clean. So I'm actually going to switch to development and going to let's just put a quick checkpoint in here. So you can also, I'm pushing this to the repository right now. There may be some previous changes in here. So I started messing with this project before, but now I cannot update it. Why I want to do this, so you can also actually see all my changes, step by step in the history instead of just the final project. So let's actually do what every good developer does when you get an error with Git. Can you please look into the development branch? We have an error, probably something on remote that needs to be fixed. I want to push everything that's locally here on the development to that branch. You can override it. It's okay. It's a playground. All right. So that is, of course, something you want to be careful with on serious projects. But I just know, because I started tinkering with this, there's probably the development branch has some stuff on there that we need to first resolve. So we now created the plan. Classification pipeline step, Pydantic AI. So yeah, this looks good. What we do, binary. Yeah, okay, so this is taking this is how we can send the PDFs or the images to the model. So that's good. And then like one thing I'm checking, like, okay, document classification. So that's a model. It's probably a little bit over-engineered, but it's actually clean to do it. So let's see, what is it going to do? It's going to document kind. It's going to add a confidence and a reasoning. Yeah, okay, this is a proper way to do it. Little bit overkill, but the thing is you could use a literal, meaning we could tell the model, just give me invoice or receipt back, and it would give that. But this creates a more structured data model around it, which is actually quite good. These types of confidence intervals, unless you very specifically prompt with examples, this is usually not very, it's not a very reliable way to do it. You can make it reliable by giving examples in the prompt, but I'm okay with it. It's good. Classify. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is what I had in mind. So we can set it up. Close out the plan. Come over here. How are we doing? Yeah, the push is done. Here's what's going on. Get a push protection, block the push. Oh, it was because of my key. Even worse. Oh, that's good actually that it blocked that. So remember, I had the test.py file with the key in there, hard coded. Interesting. Okay. Was it in a local commit? Well, anyway, like I've said, I've shown this key to you already. Like normally you want to be a little bit more careful with this, but in this tutorial, I don't care. But cool, so now we're working on the development branch. So that means when you, let's open this up. When you come in here, you can switch between the different branches. Solution will have the final result, main is the clean starting point, and then in here you can look at the commits. So you can see I already did a little bit of tinkering with this because I let just AI like one-shot the project, and then I decided like, hey, I don't like this. I want to build it myself, because that's why there's already some stuff on there. So if you now look at the checkpoint, the thing is you can pretty much then ignore all of this. If you come to the checkpoint, like you can see, like right now in this video, this is the exact snapshot of where we are. So that's how that works. That could be helpful. You can also point your agent to, you can literally say, you can copy this, give it to your agent, say like, hey, like get me to this point, and it will do that for you, which is cool. Okay, so this is now completed. So let's see, we got the pipeline in here, which is good. Actually, you know what? I don't want these things in here. Just make that a little bit shorter, because what we created, we have our pipeline, we have a classification step. So let's see what we did in here. Can you see this? We have a classification prompt and the instructions. We have the media types, and then we have a simple, where is the agent itself? We create the agent, blah, 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 agent. Yeah. And then where do we run this? Here, we run sync classification prompt. We put that in. Yeah. Okay. Looking good. Like one of the things when I'm looking at this can be a little bit hard to read, because when we actually have the run sync in here, I usually like to have the, not only the arguments, but also really the names of the functions that we're calling over here. So let's see, if we take all of this and just say over here, can you please add the keywords and the arguments in here so I can see where the data is going? So let's quickly add this, because the thing is I pretty much want to see that this is actually the prompt and we not just have this full list in here. So let's see what it does. All right, and it now finished, and I still really don't like this, all of these different solo functions. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to, let's see, we're going to give grok a spin. I'm going to plug this in, and I'm pretty much going to say, I don't like how this classification step is structured. Can you create either like one clear function of this, or rather a class where we could call like a run or a classification step on, so just so we make it a more object oriented. I don't really understand what all the private functions really do right now, why we need them. And for this is really where we enter the part of like, look, it works, you're using AI, but I'm not really understanding what it's doing. And again, it will probably run, but this is where it can help to have clear patterns and judgment of how you like to see things. And this is something where I think in the future, it will get less and less and less important, because I could have just continued here. I could have just say, fuck it, it works, let's just run it. But for the sake of like demonstration, I like now it's like getting more to something that, for, at least for me, maybe you're watching this like, hey, you made it way more complex. But for me, I like to have something like this, like object oriented, where it's like, look, we have our data types, which we already got clear on. So this is the structured output document that we want. We have our media types, we have our prompts. That's all very clear. I understand that. Now, over here, this is where we create our document classifier. So now we're going to set everything up. So we have our settings, our provider, model, we have our agent, and we can run this. Now, to me, this makes sense. Now I can like immediately look into this file. I can understand everything. And if it's the setup, I need to be here. If it's the prompt, I need to be here. And if it's on the execution part, I need to be in here. So this is way more like it. And then one thing that I want to check, so that user prompt, we have that in here, that binary content. So this is a little bit of a tricky one, how that works. This is Pydantic AI specific, because you can see we have a user prompt, and I just want to quickly double check how we now set it up, because we have the classification prompt and we have the instructions, and I want to make sure that, yeah. So this is our like instructions or system prompt. That's the classification instruction, system prompt. And then the classification prompt, this is what we add to the user prompt. So you can say user prompt, and then we put the binary content in here. And right now, I just quickly want to check again how this works. Pydantic AI is also constantly changing. So I'm going to open up the chat one more time, and let's go back to Composer and ask, hey, can you quickly check the docs from Pydantic AI for me to understand how that user prompt is built? We have a text we use a list, and then we have a user text prompt, and then the binary content. How does that binary content work, and how do we dump that into the prompt? How is that processed? So I just want to know what that looks like, but pretty much what this would be is, it would be the same as if you have either like ChatGPT or Cursor open for that sense, and you take a PDF, right, and you throw it in here. You can see this is now, like we can take that data and we can put that in there. That is how it's set up, but I just want to know where this is coming from and how that list notation works. I think we can apparently just stack things together. So while this is running, what we can do now that it is in a setup that I like, we can come back to the playground and we can classify a document, right? So we can now come in here and let's see, this is could not be resolved. What I can do, so this is one, because we're now in the playground, you still get those squiggly lines over here. And let me actually, I also always forgot what the command is. Usually in my projects, I have it set up by default, but if I, let's see, come in here and I check this, and may just want to just do it with Grok. This import gives me an error here in Visual Studio Code because it's in the playground and we're importing from the app. Can you look into my Py project toml or the root level workspace settings over here to make sure we point that app directory also and make that available in this project? Okay, that's my best description to do it. I always forget in these, like, because it depends, like if you are in a monorepo, you can put it in the Py project.toml, but because that is not in the root, it may need to be that we need to put that into our workspace file so that we have it, let's say over here. So I create an actual workspace out of it. So let's see, let's keep that open. Let's see what we can do with that. New agent, we can close this. Okay, now coming back to our question, right? So what is our classification step doing over here? How does that work? So you're not building one big text prompt. You're passing one user message with multiple parts. Yes, it builds the user message. So text, binary, and Pydantic AI wraps it into a user prompt part. Okay. How it becomes a message. Yeah, okay, so I just wanted to double check that we're using the right pattern. Cool, so now let's come back over here. Yeah, so see, you can now see this is now updating and adding extra paths to this. So this is Cursor Visual Studio Code specific. Let's actually check that. It says that it's unknown, so it may not even work. This is also, let's see, let's come back in here. Still doesn't work. I'm just going to chuck that in here. And take some screenshots. Still doesn't work, and it says the setting is unknown in Visual Studio Code. Please do some research online to figure out how we can set this up using this monorepo structure that we have, where the pipe project at Tommel lives in the backend folder. So this is one of those things. I've been working with Python, this language, for over 10 years, and like paths and imports, like they still fuck with me. I still like have continuous struggles on this. That's why the thing is, for all of our client projects, we have a standard project template that we always use. That's our GenAI Launchpad. So that's launchpad.datalumina.com. You can learn more about what that is. So I can literally clone it. I know everything is set up correctly, and I don't have stuff like this because we solved it already. And when you create a new project, depending on, look, do you have a backend and a frontend folder in here? It now created this VS Code setting. You can see this is not working. So again, this is always just messy. And I've just accepted this at this point. If you have a good tip on that, like, let me know in the comments. For now, let's continue with the classify step, because the thing is, even though it's just like a squiggly line, it will still work. So let's see. Can you still see what's going on? It's getting a little bit messy, but we just need to run this. Right now, let's see. I don't want this to be a default document. I just want this to be, let's see, we can take that, get rid of this. So we have our document path, which is our sample invoice. Remember, that's the one we had over here. And now we can call our document classifier, which we imported from app pipeline. Hey, the squiggly lines are gone. Did it fix it? It probably fixed it. Okay. Or is it because of this command over here? Yeah, that's probably also. Yeah. That's another thing that we can fix. Okay. What we can now do is we can run our classification step. And this will now not run because we're using the Jupyter interactive session. Like, it's all these little things. So this will work if I run it in the terminal. If I hit, in my case, Command Enter, I will send it over to the terminal. Let's see. We'll probably get an output, which says it's an invoice. Cool, that works. So that's good. We can run the classification. But I also want to run this via the interactive session, ideally, to kind of like play with this. So if I do this right now, again, you will get that looping error. This vent is already in a running loop. So that's a very common problem. So what you can then do, if we go into, so make sure you're in the backend. So if you're in the root, just do cd backend. We're going to add something to UV. So we do UV add nest-asyncio. That's the one that we need to add in there, so make sure you do a double check. This is the one. Then what we can do in here is we can do an import nest-asyncio, and then we apply that. And now all of a sudden, when we run this, we can run it in a Jupyter interactive session. This is a little hack. Why I like this, because right now I can just come in here and I can literally go through this step by step, then check, okay, look, really, like, what are we dealing with? What is the classification model in here? So I can literally come in here and say, okay, look, we have the following, And then on this, I can even go into, is that already here? Yeah, I can go into the reasoning. So I can really start to understand the data that I'm working with. You don't need this in production. That's why we also have it in the playground file and not in the backend file. So let's see, let's leave that in there. I also noticed one more interesting thing because remember, right? We have the following. Here we now get these squiggly lines where it says, look, this is not at the top. I know that if we use, let's see, if we go over here, create a new one, let's do it in Composer. Can you, instead of using insert, can you do path append and do a one-liner to fix the path correctly? This is also one of those things. So this is, in this case, rough. That's giving a linting error in here. And it depends on how you set up the path. Can also be one of those things that's really annoying in the beginning to deal with because we were correcting this, right? So now let's see, we can set that up. And if we now take this, let's see, put that in here. And do we actually, we need the repo root, path append. And then if we take this, thing is it needs to be one line. That's the thing. Can you merge this into one line? Because if it's just an append, Rough recognizes that it's a way to fix the import in here. Look, you see, now it's gone. And like, trust me, this is one of those things where, again, it doesn't matter. It will just run, but your IDE will keep giving you these errors like, hey, this is not right. So you can see we've simplified this a little bit. It's a lot shorter. So this is now a clean pattern that we can use. Can you use this throughout all imports in the playground and create a short agent.md file in the playground that explains how to set up the path like this? Otherwise, Rough will give an error. Warning, I should say. Okay, so we got this going. Now, one more interesting thing. Let's actually check if that is still the case. Yeah, look. This is also one of those things where you want to grab your hair out. It's like, okay, we worked on this. Where is this all of a sudden coming from? That's because of this pyrite config that we added because we were messing with the imports. If you remove this, it's totally fine. And like the code will run fine. It doesn't change anything about the code. But having that pyrite in there, if we now, let's see the settings, we have the backend folder, like this doesn't even do something. And what we actually need to solve that is it needs to be the cursor pyrite specific. So the AI was adding Visual Studio Code. So it was, let's see. So it was adding the Python analysis and the base pyrite. This is not recognizable in cursor. So if you now add this line in here, now we have our project properly set up for this approach. I know this is very nitpicky about what we're doing, but it's all because we have a monorepo with a backend and a frontend, and I am peculiar enough that I want to have a playground file in here where we import from the backend. So now you know it. Now we should have fixed it. So now, look, even if I for this one, because there's more lines, this will probably still give an error, but it's a warning. Again, it doesn't matter. It's a warning. But now here it's gone, and also in our pipeline, this now also works. So this is engineering in the real world. If you use AI, you just let it rip. You don't really care about this, but this is how you actually build a code base that you can look into, understand, and also be proud of. So that's why I want to spend some time and leave the raw things in here rather than just showing you the final result. Because the thing is, I do a project setup, a serious project setup about once a month when we onboard a new client project. And because you do it once a month and the project is always a little bit different, you're always tinkering again here. I don't do this every day. That's why you also see me struggle. And it's oh yeah, because we need the cursor setting. Okay, cool. So we're back on track and we're making great progress. So now we have our up and running classification. We can run it with the Jupyter Interactive session. This will output that it's an invoice. So we can now continue to start building our processing pipeline, right? So right now, if we have backend app pipeline, let's continue with the next step. Because remember, right, if we come back to our brief, we pretty much check this off. We can recognize whether it's an invoice or a receipt programmatically. Now we need to extract all the details, and we already created the data models for that, but now we just need to create a processing step. And here we can probably do a bunch of steps at once because we have a good foundation now. So we can probably do this and then validate the EU number. We can probably do that at one step and then even apply, let's see, apply separate domestic policies, duplicate detection, that's later. Let's focus on these ones. So let's now come in here. And what we're going to do is the following. So we're going to plan again. So let's come over here. What are we going like? Let's give Grok a spin. Can you help me continue our classification pipeline? Can you set up a nice pattern in the pipeline folder where we use some type of chaining pattern where we can chain multiple steps together? I already created the classification step, but now I want to apply the following. So depending on whether it's an invoice or a receipt, we should call the right document intelligence model, then get the data into the Pydantic data models, and then we want to extract all of the information based on the functional requirements below in order to start processing it downstream. Okay, that's what I want. Create the plan. And now we're going to build out our business logic here in this pipeline folder. And what you will notice is that I gave it a few hints as to the pattern that I like to use. So I said I want to create a chain here, and a chain pretty much in software is it's a pattern where you can just chain very obviously things together, but you do it in such a way that you can also easily add things, swap things, remove things without breaking the whole thing. So let's see what it comes up with. There are various ways to do this. Inside our GenAI Launchpad, we have a really clean pattern for that and build it out pretty much over 3 years with data models that map to it as well. But let me see what this comes up with. Okay, and it has created the plan. So what is it going to do? Pipeline chaining for classify, extract, validate. So what is it going to do? It's going to do a pipeline context, pipeline step. Okay, that looks clean. This is what I had in mind, right? So we have a classification step, and then we want to process that. What already exists, we can reuse that. I think this will become pretty clean. Okay, and while this is running and executing, what the first step or the next step is that I'm going to do as well. So the validation part, right? So we need to check what we want to validate. So let me see if the plan already added something to this. So we do extraction, like validation helper. So invoice validation. This is, I think, first business rules. Yeah. Okay. So it's already doing something on VAT check. Yeah. Okay. So it's actually already going to plug it in there to build up the business logic to figure out, okay, is it a valid VAT number? Do the numbers add up? So you can see there's a tolerance for that, so we can reconcile the totals. Yeah, so we may need to add some more to that later down the line, but I think this will already be a good setup. So this is really, if you then zoom out in the business logic and come back to our use case, right? This is really where it can get document specific. So if you're working on another project, this is where you get to go and talk with your client. Look, we have the documents, we can extract them. We have all of these AI tools. Now, what do we need to check? And then that's how you set up what you'll find. They're probably going to, I know they're going to be simple functions, because when we put them into a data model, first of all, we can validate that data with Pydantic. So that's already a validation step. Like, do we have a VAT number at all? Like, do we have that? And otherwise give an error. And then once we do, we can perform certain checks. We have all the totals and we have the subtotals, and then we can add them all up and we can see if the numbers make sense. So those will all become functions which you would call the business logic. So, okay, this has now completed. So if we go in our backend app, you can see, let's see, what did we do? First of all, the pipeline. Okay, I like that. We created a base pipeline class, so that's good. So we can this makes it so that we can reuse them as steps within our chain. We then have the classification with the classifier. We have the extraction step and we have the validation. Okay, now I want to know what it is doing over here. So name, validation, run. What is it going to do? It's going to extract it. Invoice, validate, invoice extraction, validate, receipt extraction. What is this doing? So this is the business logic. Let's see. For a receipt, there's a lot less that we can check because there's a lot less information on there. This turned out this is already quite a big file. Can you explain to me very briefly what the validation is that we're applying to the invoices? And is there also any validation that we apply to receipts? Because it gives two examples, run pipeline. Okay, yeah. This is how we do it. So now if we go to the playground, you can see we created a run pipeline file. And let's see, I don't want this in here. Also don't need this. So let's see what we got. Probably below we have, yeah. And again, I don't want this. I just want a document path in here where we can say, look, what if we take our happy customer and we do samples, we do generated, and then we have our, let's just take the first one. Okay. So what do we check? Invoices. EU VAT, it's a format check. Okay. We check if it's a valid number. We do a reconciliation. Okay, that's good. Receipts. No VAT checks. Okay, that's true. Okay, yeah. So this is performing simple checks. Like later we probably want to add some more, but this should already be a good start. So now if we come in here, I can take my document. So we have the path, and then let's see, we do a quick check. If not document files, document not found. What's this? I don't care about that. Don't want it in here. So now we're going to build default pipeline, run. Okay. Now we can run our pipeline. Let's see. No such file or directory. What am I missing? Ah, wait. This is what I'm missing. Okay, are we still good? Yes, document path looks better. Let's see, does it work now? Okay, so now what's happening is we are running our pipeline, and it's first going to classify, and I actually want to add some logging to this because now we don't really see anything. So while I do this, hey, where are we? I want my chat on the side. Where's my chat? I want my chat back. Yes. Can you add some logging to our pipeline so that when I run it, I can see the certain steps that it's at? So let that run. Wait. Oh, now I closed out the Jupyter Interactive session, which is stupid because now I need to run it again. But now we do, like, the thing is right now we don't see anything here, but behind the scenes it's doing the classification. So is it a document, is it an invoice, or is it the receipt? Then it's going to run document intelligence, that model based on the classification, and then it's going to perform all the checks. So now you can see we get the payload and we get information back. So now if we look in here to see what we get, we first of all have the classification. It says it's an invoice. That's correct. Reasoning. Okay, that's correct. And we have the extraction summary. So here you can see everything that it got from the invoice. Vendor name, VAT, customer, and then here's the validation. So we're building this gigantic payload that we can then check. And just to make sure that we know what we're looking at, so it's from BrightSpark Europe. Is that correct? That seems correct. We got a French VAT number. So we also know that this was the happy path, right? So because if we come back to the samples, this was a document that would be okay. So now we can already check. So here, number 5, it's missing a VAT. And here we got an invalid VAT. So we can also already right now, let's see, come back over here. Now we have some login in here as well. So that's good. Now if I come back over here and I take number 5, let's see, we just need the name. So I'm just going to copy the name, come in here. See, we got some, that's the logging that's added. Now if I swap this, okay, let's see what happens now. So first of all, we should see what's going on. So you can see over here, what do we get? Still running. Validation, VAT ID is null. So this is probably, yeah, totals. Yeah, okay, so it's null. It's not message vendor text ID is not present. Okay, this is good. This is good, right? Because imagine, like, in a bit, we're going to start working on the front-end application. And this is now what we can show to Maya. So Maya can now, based on this structured information over here, get a pop-up, say, look, there's something wrong. There's something wrong here. Okay, so I start to get some confidence in the system as to where this is going. So this is good. Now, if we come back to the brief, right, the next step that we need to do is our suggested general ledger account. So we could do this in the first classification step. So remember, right, if we have our pipeline, let's see, we have our classification. So here we check, is it a receipt or is it an invoice? And since this is such a simple classification task, we could just add it to this. For the sake of demonstration, I'm going to show you what it would look like if we used a separate step in our pipeline, because it could be that you're using a different model for this. So that's actually the cleaner way to do it. I could just say, look, we have document classification, and I could say general ledger code, and then I would make this any of the categories that we would have inside the system. I would actually not make that a string. I would make that another document type, and I could add it to it. But I'm going to do that separately. I don't think it's documented somewhere in the client brief what their general ledgers are. Now, so I'm going to ask AI to help us be creative with that. Okay. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to open up another chat. Let's just use the fast model, come in here and say, can you help me add another step to our pipeline? This is going to be the step where we classify the general ledger. Now, this is a hypothetical case study, so you need to come up with 10 different general ledgers that the model can pick from. Use structured output, model what we did in the classification.py step, but I specifically want an extra step for it that's only going to run after the extraction and only when it is of a type invoice. Do I want it, by the way? No, I also want it on a receipt. Okay, it should also be on a receipt. So put it after as a final step next to it and add it to the metadata as well, so that when we run the pipeline in the playground, you simply add that to it. Just follow the same patterns that we already have. Okay, let's get it up and do a quick plan. Okay, and now while that plan is working right now in the background, I want to show how this is currently set up. So you can see if we are here in the pipeline folder, we have that base, that starting point. In here, you see that we document the pipeline steps. So you can see we have classification, extraction, validation, and then the general ledger suggestion. And then here in the pipeline, what you can see is we have a run function, and this just like loops over it. So it just execute the pipeline in this order. So this is just a linear, very simple chain. You can get way more complicated with that and do all kinds of branching and if statements and routers. But this is a clean pattern because right now we have established a way to execute things in an order. And if I now add a pipeline step to it, it reads the code base and it understands exactly that it needs to follow this pattern. So design patterns can be really helpful if you want to produce cleaner code, but especially with AI agents. Like design patterns have always been there to produce more clean and readable code, but it's a really big tip to instruct your AI agents to ask, look, I am building XYZ, or I am building this feature. What is a good design pattern that I can use to potentially solve this problem? It will give you a couple of options. You can understand what it's about. Because if I simply by stating that I wanted to create a chain and mentioning the word design pattern, we came up with this. If I did not do that, and I just said, hey, go build the classifier, it would have built the class. And this would all get very messy really quickly. And it's pretty much what happens in every code base when you're using AI and you're not fully on top of things. So let's see. We now have, because it added it to the pipeline, we can now simply come back to our run pipeline. And we also, that's the beauty, we don't really have to change anything in here. At least that's the expectation. Because now if let's see, just run this one more time. And quickly, let's check what are the general ledgers that it created. So if we look in here, let's see, how did it do? I would ideally like to have that as enums. But let's see, where do I see that? GL account code, where is this? Look, it created, this is good. It is, and it's an enum, perfect. Yeah, you can see, so it created an accounting folder. So this, from an accounting perspective, this would map to certain categories within your accounting system. Pretty much general ledger, that's what it's a category in your accounting system. So, and they always use codes. So you can see if a new invoice comes in, and for our North Star facilities, which is it's a cleaning facility, it may get a purchase invoice from a cleaning company, used for cleaning, whatever, and then it puts it on the cleaning general ledger. Maintenance, electrical, you see all of these categories in here. So that is now very simple. And let's see what else is in here. Okay, yeah. So you can see, so you have the codes, and then it has more description on when to use that particular code. This is exactly how I would like to see it. This is just another classification step within our pipeline. Okay, so now if you come back to our pipeline, let's see, and we run this. Did we run that? Hello? What's going on? Let me double check what's going on over here, because this doesn't seem to be. This sometimes happens. I'm not really sure what's going on in here. How can I reset this? Do I need to reload the window? It's just a short glitch, I guess. Okay, are we back? Can I now see? Yeah, okay, I think we're back. All right, now let's run this. So now, yeah, okay. So here we see our processing steps. We get all the metadata in here. This will probably still running. There we go. So here you can see suggesting the general ledger account. And then what did it do? Suggested general ledger account 6190. So that all seems to work, which is great. 6190, that would be miscellaneous OPEX. Okay, so it put it into the most random category. So we may later want to look into that. What is it? What type of invoice is it? So what we got Bright Spark. We got okay. This is random shit. So I think it actually worked. It makes sense that it's the ambiguous general ledger account. So that's good. That's good. All right. So we are moving along pretty nicely, because if we now come back to our requirements, we are pretty much all the way over here. And we can now start to build the front end and to make this a little bit more visual, right? So this was up until this point, setup, backend, you know, all the good stuff. So now we're going to create a front end out of this. So let's see where we are. We worked primarily in the backend folder, but there's also a front end folder. In here, there's a source folder, which is currently empty. And what we're going to do is we are going to build a single page React application. So here in the agents.md is already a little bit of an explanation as to how I like to build and how I like to set things up. Now, what I'm going to do, this is the part where I already start to experiment a little bit with what things could look like. You know, front end is very, of course, style dependent. There are various infinite ways to build a cool and unique front end. So here I'm actually going to ask the agent to point to some of the earlier work, just so we don't have to spend as much time to like dial in, here's what a button looks like, here's what the screen looks like. So let's go through that. What's most important on this really is the stack that we're building with and how we are going to set this up. Because if you have this example and you have a new project and you say, hey, look at this project, now build me whatever your use case is, use those patterns, you're good. So that's going to be of great help for you. So we in here, if we look at the agents file, you can already see what we are doing over here. We're going to use feed. In my previous videos, I announced it as fight, but someone mentioned you pronounce it in the French way, fight, I guess. Maybe I still pronounce it wrong, but we're going to use that for the development server, and then we're going to use React, strict TypeScript, Tailwind CSS for styling, and is there already... I'm not even sure if we're using... I guess we'll have to find out, because usually what I like to do is I like to use ShadCN. What's this? Oh, this is admin dashboard. But yeah, here, this is a great example. Like ShadCN has all of these out-of-the-box like building blocks that you can use to build really cool UIs. But I see that it's not specifically mentioned in here, but let's see how it comes together. We may even use like plain React components. That will probably also work for this one. All right, so what we can do right now, we want to use a little bit of a heavier model, and we're going to say the following. Well, one more thing before we dive into that. Almost forgot. The thing is, we have created our backend code, but we don't really have an API layer right now. So if we come back to, let's say, our architecture, we have not implemented our API layer yet. So if we go directly to the front end, there's no way to communicate with that. So we also need to make sure we tackle and we handle that as well. So let's make sure to get that in the plan. So let's put this up. Okay, right now in this project, we're going to set up our API layer. And for this, I already did a little bit of work on the solutions branch that you're going to find in this repository. It pretty much means we're going to set up a FastAPI endpoint that we're going to make available to our front-end application later down the line. Now, the thing is, on the solution branch, we have a different implementation of what's on there. I want you to look at all the business logic, all the rules that we currently have here on this development branch, and then create the API layer around that using FastAPI. Okay, so that's the first plan that we're going to create. And while that runs, I'm going to show you what we can do on the with the front end over here. Because right now, if we jump in here, and let's say let's clear this up, and we're going to go into the front end folder and see everything that's in here. And similar to how you would set up the backend using UV, we can also set up our front end. So when I see also on my setup over here, this is also a clean setup. So there's no node module. So what we can do is we can do pm, which is going to be, if you don't have this installed, you need to quickly install this one. This is another version, a faster version of npm, so the node package manager. So we can do pm E. So what this will do, this will set up the project and we'll get all of the node modules in there. So you can see, let's see, yeah, we could also have used the frozen lock in there. That would be a little bit more strict to do it. So we have this set up and there is already config in here. So right now, if I clear this up and I do pm and I do run dev, this is going to set up the server, but it's like, there will probably be nothing here, probably empty. I mean, I guess we haven't set anything up, but we at least have a server running over here. So that's how we're going to start the development server, so that as we are going to start working on this, we can start to visually inspect things in the browser on localhost 5173. Okay, and we now have a plan to create a minimal layer of our API. So we're going to add more and more to this, but we're going to start simple with a few, let's see, a few things that we can do. So what we can do, a health check, and then we can get our accounts. Let's see, we can get list review. Okay, invoices. Is there already a run in here? Let's start building this. And then this is where we're like going to bring everything together. But like I've said, this is I don't think there's a run yet in that. So to actually call our pipeline. So while we work on this, I'm going to start another agent and give that another prompt over here and ask to help us. Can you help us set up the front-end scaffold? You can look into the solution branch, and what I want right now is I just want you to set up the welcome screen where we can click and then select the file, and then we can start the process. Also, like start the pipeline to start running that. What you need to be aware of is that what we're working on right now in the development branch is a little bit different from this from the final solution. So use what's on development right now, and then that's what we want to build the pipeline around. Also make sure you look at the API layer to add everything that you need in order to start running that. So that's going to be the prompt that I'm going to add there. And while the API layer is being built right now, I am going to kick off a plan for that. The thing is, when you follow along with that, I already updated the solution file. So you can, if you want to do like a sneak preview, you can just look into that. Again, this is just from my earlier experimentation to see, hey, what can we do with this example? What would be cool? But now I'm actually going through it step by step. So the result will be way different, probably a lot cleaner. Okay, so that plan is finished. So we now have, let's see, we have our main file where we're going to pretty much create the application. Yeah, and in here we can, let's see, we have our services, and then we have our accounting, our invoices, and this is where we're going to start building out everything that we need around this. So you can see it already also went ahead and started working on a data folder to create a SQLite database locally. So that was in the original plan. So if you don't know, like a SQLite database is just a database that you store on your file system. So you can literally see you have the invoices.db. This is now a SQLite database over here. We'll have to check if that, yeah, okay, yeah, I think it makes sense. Like we may need to make this more general than just invoices. I think it's just like the regular DB. Maybe it will also store the receipts in there. We'll have to check that later. It's going to create the endpoints. So if we now check pretty much where are we? If we have the route, so here is one endpoint. So we get GL accounts, and how did it set it up? Also here. Okay, yeah. Okay, so at this point, what I want to do, I'm also going to kick off the plan to start building the front end, because now I want to see things. So up until this point with the data part and all of the validation, I wanted to be clear to make sure, okay, I want to see what I'm doing. I want to check the data models. I want to make sure that everything is set up correctly. Now we're switching to the application layer. And again, I just want to see things. And then as I go through it as a user, I know what other features and thus also endpoints I need to add to this. So let's give this a couple minutes probably to set up the front end scaffold. And then once we get back to this, we continue from here. And if you made it this far in the video, would you do me a favor and please hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. You can also let me know in the comments what other builds you would like me to focus on, and then I consider it for future videos. If you want to learn more about all the work that I do, the projects that I work on, you can check out the links in the description. I have way more free content here on YouTube, as well as some paid resources that you can purchase via the Datalumina Academy, via our website. We have a freelancing track, an AI engineering track. So if you're serious about becoming an AI engineer, building a career in the field, and potentially even freelancing, make sure to check out those links below. All right, and the plan is finished. So let's see where we are at right now. So first of all, it gives us commands to run the backend and the front end as well. So right now, we started working from just some local files to now having a main.file entry point where we can actually spin up a FastAPI endpoint or endpoint like the application, more than just one endpoint. And then we can also run our front-end server using PM dev. Now, one thing that I always like to do when I work in a monorepo like this is the following. Can you build me a simple bash script that I can run from the root of this repository to run both the backend and the front-end simultaneously in one terminal session? That's just a little convenient thing to do. So then I don't have to manage separate terminals and run these separate commands, because during development, like things break, things stop, you try something else. So let's actually set this up and create a scripts. I ask it to put it in the root, but okay, like scripts will also work. So what I can do right now, you can check, what is it? Check local environments. Okay, it's running a whole bunch of checks. So you always want to be a little bit careful with this, because this is running pretty much arbitrary code if you don't look at it. So what we are doing, it's going to set up the project. This is all like echo, that doesn't really matter, check local info. So it's going to perform a whole bunch of checks to see if everything is set up. So our backend, right, we have that set up. On the front end side of things, yeah, let's see. I think Cursor already did that for us. It's very simple. We just need to create a copy of our env.example and call it .env. So our frontend knows where our backend server lives. So that's all good. Then what else is in here? This is just the checks. This is the cleanup, and there's a lot to it. Can you make this script as short as possible? Don't perform the environment checks. All the environment variables are correctly. I just want as short as possible to boot the backend and the front end. And there we go. We went from, what was it? Over 100 lines of code to what we actually need. And also we don't need this, to like about 10 lines of code that we need to do. So this is one big tip for AI. Ask it to write it shorter. It has a tendency to add all these comments, all these checks. I don't care about that. So now let's see if it works. We do first need to check if it works, right? So what we can do is I can go cd into the scripts folder, and then I can just do /dev.sh. And now this will boot up in here. And you know what? Okay, it's good. I considered maybe just like getting another terminal session to run this, so it's a little bit easier to look into, but for now this is okay. And let's see what we got. Yes, this is cool. Okay, so this is a familiar screen, because this is where I did a little bit of tinkering to see, okay, look, what do we want this to look like? So you can also back check this when you are pointing to the solution branch. But now, let's see if we come to our client brief, we start to, let's see what the app must do. We start to enter this part, right? Let Maya correct fields, approve, reject, and draft. So let's continue to see where we are at and what we can do in here. So let's see what's already implemented. So we now have a screen where we can go review document and we can drag and drop and we can select something. So let's see, where are we? That's my recording stuff. We need to go samples, generated, refill in Finder. From here, I'm going to drop this in. Look, this is nice, right? We can get a little bit of a preview. So Maya can see that she uploaded the correct document. There's choose different file, process. I have no idea if this already works. So behind the scenes, what's going to work right now? Remember, we're on the front end. This does not perform any logic. The logic lives in Python. So what we now do is, ideally, if this already works, when we click process, we hit the API endpoint that's going to kick off the processing pipeline, similar, remember, to what we did in the run pipeline. So let's see. This is what we experimented with, right? So now if I pretty much come in here in the app, there should, let's see, and this is already why. Is it in the routes? It's probably going to be in the routes. But I don't even know, like this is something that I need to get clear on to see where, okay. But apparently it already works, so that's good. Now I just want to have a better understanding, like a mental model for myself to understand how does this application work. And this is so crucial when you are working with AI. Like it is, you can very quickly get to a point of no return where it's like, okay, I just don't know how this application works. So like, let's continue. And you can decide to like stay in the loop by just like taking a step back a little bit and then say, okay, look, but what is it actually doing right now? So that is something I can check. I just processed my first invoice via the front-end application. How are the endpoints set up right now? Can you write a document in the docs folder that specifies and documents all the endpoints and explain to me how the run pipeline works? Okay, so let's kick that off. Also one thing, by default, so by the way, like let's go step by step. First, we have a result. This is great. So we managed to run everything. So you can see this one is ready. We got a classification, so it's an invoice. We got a general ledger suggestion. We got the reasoning in here. We got the extraction highlights, so what's in there, validation, no validations, and that's it. That's currently it. So this is a good starting point. Now, what I wanted to get to while we're documenting the endpoints, FastAPI out of the box also comes with the /docs, right? Is that, oh, sorry, wait. That should be on our API layer. So that would be localhost 8000 /docs. Look, this is the one. So here you can see all of the endpoints that are currently implemented. So we can do a get API invoices, and I'm just trying to understand, we can upload, we can get, but how is it? I'm just trying to understand where it kicks off the pipeline. Let's see, how does it work? Currently, yeah, so API invoices, upload, process, run, fall pipeline. Okay, so it decided to call it invoices. To me, that's already a little bit questionable because we can also upload receipts, I guess. Does this also already support receipts? And why is the API called /invoices if it can also accept receipts? So the thing is, I'm just going to act like I'm stupid over here to ask the questions. And then, yes, receipts are also supported. What happens? It classifies, blah, 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 blah. So table, services, invoices is review artifact, document kind. Yeah. And look, here it suggests a clearer name would be something like documents, because then, depending on the document, we could classify and process more documents. That is something that, just for the sake of completeness, I would actually like to do. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Can you actually refactor the entire code base right now? Make sure you do it both on the front end and the back end to call the API documents, just so it's more clear. Quickly do a plan because it's going to touch multiple parts of the code base. Create a plan. So you see, these are all the little things. Does it work? Yes. Are you creating clean code that makes sense? No, because then someone else might jump in here and be like, oh, this is apparently the endpoint to process invoices, but what about receipts? And it's, oh yeah, that's the same one. It also does receipts. And you're like, okay, that doesn't make sense. So that's why, as you can see, even with planning, even in this case, we're taking very short steps. AI just fills in the blanks. So if we go to the API and pipeline, you can see, so first, okay, let's build that out. Let's open this in a preview. Are we good? So you can see it now has the documentation in here. Get some cool graphics over here. But this is anyway going to change right now because I've just asked it to update it. Okay, so let's give this a moment, and then we got our API layer in here, which is documented. We can keep that open. Now I want to close the loop. So meaning after you process the document, I want Maya to be able to either like accept it, okay, this is passed, or make manual adjustments in here. So that's going to be the final part really of this application, because we have the beginning right now, but how do we let the user validate and control this? That's what I want to work towards. So we're going to do that as follows. So we're going to use another agent, of course. Okay, I now want you to close the loop on the application layer and really get back to the original user story from Maya, and then also look into the solution branch and help me dial in this application. So we have the full loop of uploading documents, then processing them, and then either passing or rejecting them, and also for Maya to be able to update them in the UI. We can look into our sample data set that we created in the manifest to know what we need to check and what errors we need to show at what time, depending on our data set. And we need to make sure that everything passes on the evaluation data set. Now, one final thing, you'll find that in the solution, while all of the features are there, what we need to do is we need to make sure we adjust the architecture to the current setup that we have in this code base, which is a lot cleaner. That's what we want to work towards. So can you help me create a plan for that? Okay, so now that's going to be a big one, but you can see, so we have now renamed all of that. So let's check if, let's take PDF number 2. So this is a different one. Let's see if that all still works. Hey, but this is cool, right? So now we're like really building something. And the beauty of this is that, again, I keep stressing that, like this processing step and this UI and the approach that we're doing here, you can apply this to any type of review. So, okay, we are now still at the same point, but what we have adjusted pretty much is if we come back to this and I refresh this, boom, you can see we now have documents, which makes a lot more sense. So we can get documents, we can post documents, we can delete documents. We have our accounting in here. So this is starting to come nicely together. So now this is planning out a lot, and we're going to take quite a big jump here. And then as we go through things, we can dial things in. Why I want to go a little bit faster here is like, you can spend a lot of time on that application layer to figure out, okay, look, what button do I need to press on? What do I want to showcase? What color do I want to use? And that is just so project specific that I'd rather just like implement it right now, get through it a couple of times, and then go into the deployment step. So that's the final like cherry on top, because this is an end-to-end project. We're going to deploy it on Azure as well. Okay, and we have another plan that we can start to execute. So here you can see what we're going to do. So upload, then we have the pipeline steps. We're going to persist the stage blobs. Okay, so this means every step of the pipeline, we want to store the metadata so we can reuse it in the UI. Then we're going to evaluate, select the general ledger account, and approve or reject, and then create the automation or the correction email that we can send back to the supplier. So this is where we'll still spend some time to dial that in, see what it looks like. Okay, so this is just a big one that we're now going to kick off and work on to really bring this application together, and then we'll do some refinement. Okay, and while this is continuing to work in the background, one thing that's really good to like talk about a little bit, and why this project can be built in such a way, is that we have the documents and we have our North Star policies pretty much, which means we have for every document here in the manifest, we know what the outcome should be, right? So remember, if we come back over here to the sample documents, it all started with this. Example documents where we know, look, if we put this into the system, this is what we ideally would like to get out of it. And when you have something like that, you can essentially give your AI agents a goal to start working and to start optimizing towards that. Because we know that for all of these documents, there should be no expected classification code in the front end. Meaning if Maya or we upload those documents or our AI processes them, whatever, it should just like run fine and it should be ready. So it should be like a green check mark, like, okay, this is approved. But for these documents, we need to like pause it and we need to say, look, we need a review. And why do we need a review? For these particular types of expected output codes that we want in there. So that's also why I am okay with taking a big jump right now, because I know our AI agent is optimizing our logic and our UI towards highlighting and surfacing this. So what can we learn from this? Whenever you start with a project, make sure that you get some type of data set that you can label. Make sure that you know what is flowing through your system, what good looks like, and what the errors are that need to surface. Now, this is easier said than done because this is, of course, a synthetically generated data set. It's also very small. If you go to clients and you start with this, you may often just have a couple of like happy path examples. We recently built out a very, very extensive document review pipeline for one of our clients where we had to check very large Word documents for like spelling, grammar, but also certain business logic. And these pages could be like 40-page Word documents. And we started building it out, and we only pretty much started working with like 3 happy path examples, where we then put some like random spelling and grammar mistakes in just to see where the model would stop, right? And that worked. We started building, but then like once we like got to like the proof of concept phase for the first part, and we started to put more documents through it, longer documents, like a lot more errors surfaced. And with that, also edge cases in our code base. Now, this always happens. This is part of the process. You never like one shot an application of a scale, of a size like that, and then like it just works. But the most important thing to keep in mind, the more data you can collect upfront, labeled data with different types of scenarios, things that go wrong, things that go right, things that go wrong, things that have another type of output, the better. And especially if you combine that with AI, it's amazing because now I just know this is going to work in the loop. It's going to use our new project setup because the example that I played with in the end, like it had a way different setup. So this is going to be much cleaner. And yeah, let's jump back in when this is all done and we can go through the UI together. Okay, and we are through. Let's see. Is our application still running? Scroll all the way to, okay, yeah. So that's good. Let's give this a quick refresh. Here as well, we should have, so we now have more endpoints. Meaning like endpoints are the doors to our backend, really. So every time we add a new endpoint, we can then create a cool front-end UI thingy that can knock on that door and use that. That's my best explanation, really, of what an API is. I hope you understand. Okay, so now what we can do if we go through the review process again. Let's see. Let's clean a couple of things up, and let's come back to the examples. Okay, so now we can start to put some stuff in here. Okay, let's run this one more time. same screen, right? But now, once we get to the next screen, we should be able to close the loop, right? Because remember, like in the previous step, it was just like, here are the results. And that was it. But now we need to check, look, we also have a history in there and we can start a new review. So let's see what this is doing. So beautiful. First of all, we get a warning, and we know, by the way, that this should, this one is okay. So we can check, okay, what is it doing in here? So there is a confidence vendor name is below 80%. So that's actually interesting that there is a confidence level in there, but this is great. This is great. Look, you can see it parsed all of the information from the invoice. And we also run a cross-check with the LLM. So this is just an extra step that I have added to it. You don't need to do it, but this is like, first we process with document intelligence, then we also process it with an LLM. And then you can decide if you want to combine them, what you want to use. You maybe want to route and split off depending on certain values that you find. But this is a very great setup. So the only thing is the vendor name is below 80%. I think it did just fine. BrightSparks Europe. Just double check that to cross-reference. It did fine in this case. So this is a feature that, or a setting that you may want to dial in. So now what I can do is I can either like manually reject as a user, but I can also approve it. So this is now approved. Now, the cool thing is now if I go to my history, you can see that we're building up this database where we have all of this data. Because it's approved right now, I can now not edit this. And let's see, there should be, if I'm in the history, view history, there is an option to delete it. So if you click on this, you can delete it. But we just built a very simple and minimal UI, just enough to get things started and to get things going. Now, what we know about this is that if we go to, let's say, a new review, and we now take, I think number 5 was the first one where there was a missing VAT, right? So now we have this one over here, process the document. So let's see how this goes. And let's see how the application handled the UI layer around missing fields. And whether it has already implemented the final step to say, look, now we're missing something. So as you can see, this is good. So now we get an error and a warning. So again, this warning is that the confidence score, and then this is an actual error. That should now mean that I cannot, as a user, I cannot approve this. That's exactly how we want it. Because look, this is not in there. So let's see what information we have. It needs a review. So one final, here we have the general ledgers. One final idea that I had to put in here, which I see it's currently not in here. So it is. It put it over here. Yes. So what I can now do is, okay, we need to take an action, right? Because when you think about this from a systems perspective, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to go through this. So now Maya would have to like reply to that vendor and say, hey, we're missing a VAT number. But what if we now click on this and we're drafting the email? So now you can see and now this is using I have to check, is this, this is another company. This is now using our language model in the backend. So you can see we now have the email. We can now copy it. Of course, you could go way further and make an integration and automatically email this. But I want to show you these little bits and pieces so you can start to understand how I think about building solutions like this and give you the building blocks to start playing with this. So I think this is really cool, kind of like cherry on top. So right now I cannot approve this, so I need to reject this, and I need to send that email in order to get another invoice. Okay, now here we can see the history. Let's do one more. Let's try the receipt. So let's say we have the fuel receipt. It's this one. Let's process the document, see how that works. That should have different rules and business logic in there because a receipt has way less information than an invoice. For example, typically not a VAT number. So let's see also based on so this should actually pass. So this is the receipt that should pass. So let's see if that works. Everything is green. All the information is in here and we can hit approve. And that is now approved and stored in our history. Okay, so this is coming together real nice, right? And as you can imagine, right now it's all about getting more examples to it and coming back to pretty much, if you were to build this for a client, coming back to our functional requirements. This is what you would put in a proposal, and you could literally with the client check off, can we do this? Yes, we can do that. We tried both the PDFs and the images. We accomplished this. We can extract it. We can check the VAT numbers. We can suggest a general ledger account. We can let Maya approve, correct, etc. And we have a review history. That means we have successfully now delivered this project and we can start to prepare a handover or potentially a deployment. Now, what always happens in the real world, and this is always something you should account for, is this is never going to be the version where users are totally okay with. Because if I now hand this over to Maya and Maya is going to like work through it, it's just going to have questions like, hey, can it also do this? What I would also love to see this. Hey, can we make this a little bit more clear? You know what? Actually, like this part, I want to have that at the top. You know, these are all these little things that will come up as users start to use it. And you can spend a lot of time here, so that's just something you need to be aware of. If you're doing this as a freelancer, always make sure that you make a distinction between, look, what is just actually within the requirements and is like little feedback that is okay to adjust versus like completely new features. If Maya, for example, now asks, okay, can we also process Word documents, which I know it's different. It's not exactly the same as PDFs or images. It's very simple. Like the client may not have mentioned this. Like, yeah, we need to process PDF and images. And I was, oh yeah, actually I also have a couple of Word documents. And that would be a new functional requirement that needs to be scoped out and that needs to be built separately in order to process that. So what we are now going to do is I'm going to pretty much do a final check and then start to prep for the deployment, because I want to show you what it would look like if we were to deploy this in Microsoft Azure, really end to end. And when we talk about deployments and the whole world of deployments, there are a lot of ways that you can go about this. Generally, what we do, if we have an application like this, I would create a separate backend and I would create a separate front end deployment. We deploy all our client projects if we get to decide on Hetzner, which is not on Azure, but a lot of our clients use Azure. So we work in that platform a lot as well. You can either deploy it straight on a virtual machine or you can use container apps. Container apps is a little bit more straightforward, and that's what I want to show you. And I think it's possible to take the whole app and put it into one single deployment. So I want to create a plan for that. This is not what I would generally do if I were to deploy it for a client, but it is going to help us in the demonstration. And also like spinning up a container instance is going to incur some costs. So I want to make it really simple for you and highly recommend you to follow along. Just create it and then you can simply turn it off and delete it. But having it actually on a URL that you can look into rather than localhost is going to make like all the difference between, oh, it's actually a demo that I could just point towards Claude Code and ask me to build this versus, oh wait, I can actually deploy this and I can now hand this over to a client. So let's start working on that. And what we're going to do for that is, let's see, we're going to come in here, open up a new chat window, and let's see, we're going to, we'll do another checkpoint. Let's put all of this in here. Yes, make sure to sync those changes so we know where we are. And then, okay, the project is in a pretty good spot right now. What I now want to do and need your help with is a deployment. I want to deploy this on Microsoft Azure. We're going to use the CLI and I want to put this into the resource group that we already created. And I want to deploy this as a single container application where we bring all of that together. Can you walk me through this and help me understand how we can do that and how we can create a deployment like that and create a plan for it? All right, so while we kick that off, let's come over to, where are we? Microsoft Azure. Come back in here. So if we look into our resource over here, if we were to create, we could set up pretty much a lot in here. So we could, for example, go into container apps. If I search for container, and there's actually so much. This is then actually the one that that you would be looking at. So what you should always keep in mind is when you are searching in the marketplace, because there's so much, you have default services from Microsoft, and you also have a whole lot of like third-party applications that you can usually also use as standalone services, not through Azure. But then, for example, I have no idea what this is, but this is like from another company, and they also offer something through Azure. In the beginning, when you explore this, I generally would say like use as little of those managed resources as possible. Like the container apps, the databases, that's pretty much all you need, and maybe some AI services, but other than that, not really. And if you want to explore with that, like make sure you stay with the Microsoft resources in the beginning, because those are generally what you want to go after. So you can use a container app, but you could also use like, I don't even know what it's, you could use a virtual machine, and then on there you have different, you have a variety of different servers that you can set up. So here's like, you can set up an Ubuntu virtual machine, you can set up a SQL server, like all these different versions of Ubuntu, Linux, whatever you want to set up, it's all available in here. So there's just a little bit of an explanation on the marketplace. So now let's see what this is doing. This is still doing a little bit of research. By the way, I haven't done the deployment on this project just yet. So I also have to figure out how this is going to play out and how we can best set this up. Okay, so here is the plan. So today in the current setup, we have two local processes. We got our API layer, which is running through Unicorn. That's our backend. And we got our front end, which is served through Feed over here. For Azure, we collapsed that into one container. So we built the React single page application into static files. Okay, then the thing is this something I want? Probably. Okay, we could just try. Like then we're going to run FastAPI Unicorn on one port, and then that's going to serve all of it. Target Azure Home already exists. Yeah, we got the resource group. We're going to deploy it in West Europe, and then let's see what we're going to do. We're going to use Azure Container Apps. Yeah, one HTTPS URL, secrets for Azure keys. Azure Files Volume, yeah, we added Azure Files Volume for the SQLite uploads. Okay, no app service, no separate frontend host. Okay. Let's see, the app has no login. Yeah, so that's one thing. We may want to add that to it. So the thing is, when you deploy stuff and when you put things on the internet, if you don't have a firewall on there, everyone can pretty much access that. So that's just something you need to be aware of. So I think for the sake of demonstration, I am going to put a quick password protection on it. So let's see, a public URL lets anyone burn. Yeah. Okay. Can you adjust the plan to add a simple logging page to it? Just do a password protection. So not a like complete login with an account, just a password. That is because I want to keep it simple for now. Okay, so we're going to put that in there as well. And it also shows you how we can potentially clean it up afterwards and how this is going to do things. So let's make sure we update the plan with the password to add that to it, and then we're going to run all of that. Okay, so it adjusted the plan, and what I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to hit the build on this because we first just need to provision the resources, start deploying to it, and then see if everything works. So the architecture that we're now going to use is the following. So like I've said, we're going to use the Azure Container Apps and a container registry to register our application. Then we're also going to use Azure Storage Accounts instead of a dedicated database. So we could also say, look, we wanted to have a dedicated database deployment on it, but because this is a simple project, we can use a storage account, and in there we can just dump our SQLite database, and then the log analytics, I think it always adds this. This is just a way for us to look at the logs, the application logs. So let's just see how it is going to set this up. All right, so now as you can see, it is working through everything, setting up all of the resources. And once this can probably take some time, some trial and error to get it just right. I will make sure that I will update the project and the deployment steps for you here. So it's a little bit more clear step by step, and it's also not that big of a jump between, okay, what is the AI agent going to do in the Azure environment, right? So it will be much more of a learning experience rather than just like prompting along, if you will, right? So you can see we got the resources provisioned right now. So we got a container registry. That is pretty much where you can register the Docker containers, and then through that we can make it available. This is our storage account. So storage account is pretty much just a drive. We can just put data in there. So we can even go into there's probably nothing in here, but we can even go into like, let's see. I'm not sure if it's going to use this or the blob containers. We can check, but this is, yeah, so you can see it's using the classic file share. So here it's like already creating a file. So this is where it's going to put the SQLite database in. So again, like I've said, there are many different ways on how you would set this up. And if this is the first time you're working with Azure or with deployments in general, like I know like this is a lot. You're like, what the fuck's going on here? Because it seems to be such a big black box. And that's also not the purpose of this video, rather. That's why I say I'm going to move quickly, right? This is how I would build. This is how I would set things up. And then with the like brief and the documentation over here, you can like fill in the gaps, but then you have at least seen what things look like and what the end is that you're going to work towards. And that has always been throughout my career the best way to learn. Just see someone do it end to end, follow along, and then start to swap out the components. Okay, what does this do? What does this do? And the beauty in today's day and age with AI, it's as easy as ever to just literally say, like, take this. Like, you could literally take a screenshot and throw it into like any AI. It's like, what is this? How does it work? Can we replace it? So let's see how we are coming along. This is still looping in here and trying to set something up. So I will get back to you when this is finished. All right, and it worked. Well, we have to check. I haven't validated this, but we got a URL, we got our password. So what just happened? We created a deployment in Microsoft Azure, and in Microsoft Azure, we combine different managed resources. Ultimately, where our project lives is under the container app. So we got an environment, the registry, and don't worry, I will create a very detailed document for you to learn more about how all of this works and how they all play together. But this is ultimately our container app where we are running the application. So how this works, it says failed, so we'll have to see if this works. But whenever we create a deployment, you get a URL from this. So by default, it will not point to like, I don't know, your fancy own domain. It will first create an internal like domain that Azure will give to you. You can put this on a custom domain, but at first you will get something like this. If I click on this, let's see if it works. Okay. I'm not sure why it says failed here. Maybe we need to check. Maybe if I refresh. Let's see. That seems pretty failed to me. But okay, look, this is now a URL. So we're not on localhost. If you right now were to go to this URL, you would see this exact same screen. And then if you were to put in that exact same password, you would be able, you would be able to log in here as well and see this exact same application and use it. But by the time you're watching this, I already removed everything, unless I forget, and then you can still access everything. So now I can review a document. So let's pick one. Let's see, we do the total mismatch. So this is one that would actually fail. So okay, this is looking pretty good. This is looking pretty good. Let's process it. I'm quickly going to check why. Let me actually give some more resources to say, let's see. Okay, what was shipped? This is shipped, this is shipped. Okay. Why does this show failed? Why am I typing? I should use Glido. Why is this show failed? Because the application is working right now. Okay, let's see. There we go. So we got the whole thing. Look, it's rejected. We can draft a correction email. So this is using all of our credentials. And one thing to know about deployments, which can always be a little bit tricky, is we run locally, right? Okay, we test everything worked, we have our environment variables, then we deploy, but we also need to make sure that our application layer also has access to those environment variables. And I'm gonna quickly check, because normally what you would do, you would put that at the container app level, and then you go to security secrets. There we go. So you could see via the CLI, the agent also plugged in our OpenAI key, session secret, and our keys over here. I'm not sure where it has the end. Maybe it doesn't need to. I don't know why the endpoints are not in here. Maybe we need to check that, but this is where our keys are. Look, if I now click on this, this is my OpenAI key. This is my document intelligence key. Let's see what it's doing over here. Maybe it's using some type of like private, and maybe it can extract those endpoints because it's all within Azure, but let me actually ask that. So first of all, let's do a little bit of debugging. So the app is working. You're just looking at a failed revision. Not okay. So that was just, okay. This was just probably during the deployment process. First it failed. Okay, that's good. Now, let me also get more clear on this and say, when I look into my secrets, I see the API keys, but where are my endpoints? Why do we not need them? Is this provisioned somewhere else? Okay. Good. So now we got an official deployment. This is cool. So we got the history in here. So now I also want to quickly check. We got the storage account, remember? So locally, we got our backend, we got data, and we got this documents.db. So if you were to open this with any like SQL client, we could read into this SQLite database and we could read the data that's in there. But now, since we don't really want to store the data in our container app, it used a storage account and then it created, let's see, there we go. There is our documents.db. So this is now where our data lives. So again, you have lots of questions. What the fuck is going on? How does all of this work? But we use this instead of a database, for example, instead of Supabase, a PostgreSQL database, to just dump it in here. And this also totally works. For a like internal application, this would be valid. Like probably I would still in like a client build still use a regular database, but that also costs more if you want to deploy it. A storage account is pretty much free on Azure. And if you want to run a PostgreSQL database, that can already quickly get to 20, 30, 40 bucks a month. So that's also something you should keep in mind. And as if you do it on Azure, by the way, though, there are way cheaper ways to get a database up and running. If you use a VPS on Hetzner, you just deploy your database there, way cheaper. But yeah, this is our storage account. So let's come back. So let's learn about the endpoints. The endpoints are there, just not under secrets. They're plain environment variables. Okay. Yeah. So the thing is, I rarely use the container apps because we usually deploy straight to VPSs, to a virtual machine, because I have Joris on our team who manages all of that. If I were to manage the deployments on my side, I would probably also use container apps because it's a little bit easier. So where we can find that, let me pull myself to the other side. If we are on the container apps, containers, so containers, and then in here, environment variables, look. So here are the extra environment variables that we can plug in here. Now, the beauty of the CLI is that it knows how to manage all of this, and this just saves a ton of time versus just having to go through all of this. So remember, like the secrets, I'm not sure, like I think in the previous step I was blocking it with my camera. Secrets are over here, and that's where you actually have the API keys, and then in containers, environment variables, you have this. So that is just pretty much a way of, look, how do we get all of our, where is it? environment variables and how can we make it available in this case, our production environment. So we are now coming to the end of this build. It now has fully been the end-to-end build because we got a live website, we got an application, we got the backend, the front end, we got password protection, we got storage, we got the whole thing in here. So let's wrap this up. So one thing that I want to still share with you, before I did the deployment, I created a checkpoint. So you can see in order to deploy it, you can see we added some more layers to the application. So first of all, there is an authentication layer because we added the password, right? So that also needs to check on all of the subdomains, or not subdomains, like URLs that you can get to from the application layer, that they are protected by the authentication layer of the password, right? Right now we have a simple password, but you could do like a login and a password. You could hook it up to like Google login, GitHub login, whatever makes sense for your application. And then it added the Docker files. So this is the Docker file. So this is what's ultimately this is ultimately what's going to help Azure and the container apps to decide how to run and how to serve this application. And you can see there is some more documentation in there. And I'm going to use that to make the documentation for you on this page super crystal clear to work through. So that's going to be nice. So I'm going to hit this with another checkpoint so that you know, let's call this a deployment checkpoint. So if you're following along and you're checking the development branch, you know that at this was the step where we went from like a local application to the application that is now deployed. Okay. So we got that set up. Now, if you follow along with this and you're wondering, okay, what's going on? Like I got this resource group right now. You want to play with it. These are a whole bunch of resources in there. Some will cost some money, like as you have them on. So for example, the container apps. Just know that you can always delete the resource group. If you are at the top level resource group, you can just do this, delete. And then it's going to, you can see, it is going to delete everything that's in there. If I run this, my endpoints will not work again. Document intelligence will not work. This is gone. No cost will be incurred. So it's very easy to play with this. And again, in the beginning, I remember when I just started out with Azure, and by the way, I have certifications in Azure. I got them like some years ago already. I'm officially like a Azure certified data scientist. I got the DP100. Is that the one? DP100 Azure? I think so. Yeah. This is the one I got. So I remember when I was studying for this certification and this exam, and I was working with some clients where we also worked in Azure, I always found it like very like scary. Like, oh, what if I click here? What if I do this? And now you can see I'm just reckless because I know like as big as the platform is, it's really hard to like truly mess something up. Like that's almost impossible. Now, of course, with data, you want to be careful if you're working with client data because you can be reckless in the sense that a database or an application is publicly available. So you always want to check that. This has by no means been a full guide on how to create secure applications because that single password protection was probably like easy to break and also downstream on all of these services. We haven't really talked about that yet in this video, but it's also beyond the scope. This is just to show you how you can get up and running, how you can build projects end to end, and hopefully along the way have understand kind of like how I break down these problems and then sequentially build towards a final solution. All right, and that's the end of this build. So another exciting one. So if you found it valuable, please leave a like. And again, if you're not subscribed already, please consider if you want to see more content like this. Now, let me know what kind of other projects or builds you would like to see. The fact that you made it all the way to the end, first of all, means you like this type of content, and I guess you've learned something from it, otherwise you would have probably clicked off. So you are exactly the reason why I make this video. So let me know, what do you want to see me build or cover, and I will make sure to check it. And now, if you want to continue learning, there are a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to put a video up here that you can check out right now here on YouTube, but also make sure you check out the links in the description so you can learn more about my work, what I do, and how I can potentially help you to become a highly paid AI engineer.